We're live with the Hole in the Soul podcast. Kevin Oldham and Jose Bolaños here to visit with you. But before we do, quick shout out to our new company, VUCA Fit. VUCA Fit is a resource portal where you can find free as well as paid resources that will help you improve your life. The free resources that I would like to highlight are two. I've incorrectly said that the breathing cheat sheet is on there. That's actually not on there. What we have on there are two resources, one of which is a list of books that we highly, highly recommend. The books that Jose and I have read, they've impacted our lives in different ways. If you're not a heavy reader, go check out Blinkist or some other application that will give you the summaries, but they're really, really worth it. Second resource that we've put together is Jose's 5 steps to becoming unbreakable. There are ways that you can experiment at home, safe to fail experiments that will allow you to start building your capacity to deal with VUCA. VUCAFit.com, VUCAFIT.com. Jose, I just said something in there. I just said safe to fail experiments. What the hell does that mean, my friend?
Safe to fail experiments. Well, what is that? If they fail, it's not complete and total catastrophic failure. You're still alive. You're still okay. Nobody died. Your company's still functioning. Safe to fail. If you fail, you're good. You can still keep on going. That's what safe to fail means.
Put another way, in Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, you get to wake up tomorrow and still play the game.
Yeah.
You're still in the game. You're still in the arena. You haven't done anything that's irreversible. And I think about, I don't want to laugh, but there's this case going on in Kansas City, and who knows what the truth is. I always assume that you're innocent until proven guilty, but the headlines in the Business Journal where a gentleman was in a similar business to your brother, but different, would take, trailers and things like that and configure them for specific uses and made some bad decisions. Companies filed for bankruptcy. He filed for personal bankruptcy. That is the opposite of safe to fail. Now, I have no doubt that if this individual is innocent and does not go to prison, then that person will probably have another act in life and will still be in the game. But when I see headlines like that, that's the opposite of safe to fail. It's something that's catastrophic and ends your company.
That's chaos. That's catastrophic. Potentially a catastrophic failure, which means you're not in the game anymore. But yeah, you're right. Safe to fail means that you're still in the game. You're still alive. You still have a pulse, and you can still keep on going. But it also, the wisdom of safe to fail, it's a mindset that helps us experiment with things without a lot of attachment and with less fear around failure. So we become comfortable with failure. If something doesn't work, we're very comfortable with it. Sometimes entrepreneurs or anybody is afraid to take action because they don't want to fail versus act, fail, and make sure it's safe to fail and keep on going. But
I mean, it's very similar to the lean startup methodology. Eric Ries's book that really, really helps, I think, a lot of new ventures. Really, we're talking a lot about, it doesn't always have to be light. I mean, it doesn't always have to be business. Safe to fail experiment could be trying a new hobby and realizing you don't like it. But in the lean startup, his whole premise there was around, do little actions, get feedback, adjust, iterate, whatever. In some cases, stop. Safe to fail.
Well,
so very similar to that methodology, I would assume.
In startups, it's very common. You're mostly experimenting. You're mostly trying things out, and as you start developing procedures, SOPs, so on and so forth, you start experimenting less and start standardizing things. But that said, I think every company always needs to have this capacity, this mindset of safe to fail. So you want me to tell you a little bit about where this is, like where this concept comes from, at least for me? Because I know in design
Yeah,
thinking,
absolutely.
lean startup, design
Yeah.
thinking, you're going to hear something similar, iterations, trial and error. But this comes from a model which shows us that there's 4 different types of challenges that we can face in any moment. And it's important to understand the type of challenge so that we can give the best response. If we understand the type of challenge, we can give the best response and not fall into full catastrophic failure. So I use the example, you probably heard me say this before, of the phone. If my phone battery is low, what do you suggest I do?
I'd suggest that you charge it.
Yeah, plug it in.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. Plug it in.
So that's
Yep. Give it some juice.
an obvious and simple challenge. A equals B, predictable, under control, plug it in, and it should work. It should give you the response, and that you've taken care of the challenge. This could be also the fuel tank comes on, the fuel light comes on in your truck. So what do? You go to the gasoline station, you fill it up, fuel tank, light goes off, solved. Simple, obvious. But then you move into another realm of challenges where my computer might be making it might be making a noise, it might have a glitch in it, or my truck might be making a noise, or I need an SOP done for me, or I need an LLC developed for us. We hired somebody to make an LLC for us. So when it's complicated, this is the world of experts. You call a mechanic, you call a doctor, you call a lawyer, you call an engineer, an architect, so on and so forth. And for them, the challenge will be predictable, under control, and it'll still be ordered. So simple and complicated, they're ordered. You can solve them, and there's some control to it and some predictability to it.
Yeah.
With me so far?
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, so you've told me, let's update your social media profile. And it's a little bit complicated for me. I'm like, okay, it could be simple, but for me, it's a little bit complicated. I don't even know where to start. So you send me a video. Do this, 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 this. If I do that, it's solved. It's done. Right? So simple and complicated are on the side of order. But then we go to the side of disorder. So on the side of disorder, you have complex challenges. So what's a complex challenge? A complex challenge is something that is influenced by multiple variables. And you can't predict how any of those variables are going to affect the system. So it's a dynamic living system. And if you change one variable, the system will reorganize itself, but you can never predict exactly how it's going to reorganize itself. So here's where you do safe to fail experiments. You try to understand a little bit, gather as much information as possible, and then decide on an experiment, decide on an action, and then see what happens. Gather information and decide the next action, and then see what happens. So the entire process is actually take action, analyze, respond, and keep on repeating and doing as many safe to fail experiments as possible. You with me?
Makes sense. I am with you.
Yeah. So yesterday I was talking to somebody in digital marketing. I was actually talking to, I was in one company, a company which we will not name.
Yep.
And I was yesterday met with the company where the founder of that one company came from.
Okay. Yep.
I'll name this one. I was at meeting with White Shark Media.
Very familiar with White Shark.
And so I was talking to them and I'm like, one thing I see in digital marketing is that the clients don't understand, and even the marketer doesn't understand, that what they're doing is trying to solve a complex challenge.
Mhm.
So the marketer,
Super complex.
it is. So the marketer doesn't know how to explain to the marketer, because of some fear, doesn't want to tell the client, look, I'm actually just going to experiment. I'm actually going to try things
Yeah.
out. You're hiring me to manage a complex challenge, which is unpredictable.
Right.
We will try things and see how they go, and then we will hone them, and then we will fix them, and then we will try to create the conditions so that you will be, get more leads. That's complex.
Mhm.
You can't even guarantee that shit.
Very correct.
And the
A lot of
business
times you can't.
the business owner, on the other hand, doesn't want to hear that shit either. He doesn't want to hear that you're going to experiment and try and possibly get more leads. No. So the business owner thinks that you're the expert that's going to solve a complicated problem. You're
Mhm.
pretending that you're the expert that's going to solve a complicated problem, when in reality, you're talking about a complex challenge. Gathering leads, getting leads, being on the search engine optimization, being at the top of the page,
Mhm.
being number one. That's all a complex challenge. And the way we create,
Right.
so we create the conditions through safe to fail experiments. If we can all understand that, we can become a lot better capable of creating these safe to fail experiments and creating the conditions. Does that make you with me so far?
Mhm. Yep.
And
Yep. And it also makes me think about like some of these older, not older, it doesn't always have to be an older organization, but an organization that is not as nimble, and really that's the bigger an organization gets, typically the less nimble they are. I have a friend here at Kansas City who has a remarkable company called Dimensional Innovations. And if I could describe this organization, I would say, well, I'd actually share with you their purpose statement. They're freeing the world from mediocre experiences. So what does that mean? A guy I went to high school with, believe it or not, who was a Kansas University fanatic, went and chased down and raised money and won at auction the actual rules to basketball, the ones that Mr. Naismith created. Now, you listeners may not know this, but Kansas University is where Mr. Naismith actually invented basketball. So the rules of basketball, the written rules of basketball, were the original ones, are in an experiential exhibit at Kansas University. Dimensional Innovations creates those types of cool experiences, like they did the Minnesota Vikings. They do them for a lot of major league teams, like Minnesota Vikings fan experience. Okay, so that's their business model. They're in the business of blowing your mind, basically, right? And I got to go tour their location, and I think the coolest part of this entire facility, where they've got makers and fabricators and technologists, I mean, it's actually just a really cool building to be in because of the creative energy that's there. But my favorite place, and I will just call it the safe to fail room. Two dudes in not a closet, but not a huge space, that's running basically skunk works types of projects, safe to fail experiments. They're just in there. And these guys were working on just some movie popcorn thing, just random stuff or whatever. Their whole job is running safe to fail experiments.
Yeah.
That's all they do. And I'm like, and I toured them about 6 years ago. I'm like, still thinking back, I'm like, that is so cool that this big, cool organization has a place. It's a failure sandbox.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, there's going to be an innovation that impacts the entire organization or client projects or something cool. So I just think that's cool.
But despite that, everything is safe to fail. Even when it comes out of that room, you still have to put it, and then you got to test it. You got to see how it lands. People creating art, creating music, creating experiences, creating designs. It's all, we're all experimenting. It's basically, the bottom line is we're all experimenting, and nobody hasn't figured it out. And it's how the universe unfolds. What works now won't work later. That entire exhibit might get boring. So to be capable of of generating safe to fail experiments continuously, and to see them when. So I launched VUCA Fit Dojo, and in English, and we saw that it had difficulty taking off. And then I experimented in Spanish, and it worked. In Spanish, it was doing a lot better.
Right.
But then it did really well for 2 months, and then I saw a drop at the third month. Something happened in the third month, transitioning the payments. I'm like, oh, there's information here. There's something. So how do I? So one person might see, oh, this is a failure, or okay, what do I do with this? What? How do I change?
Right.
What? How do I create something different? I might do something to retain them, or I might make it shorter. But I just
But you get the feedback.
I get the feedback
Because you and I are running the English speaking dojo together. We're halfway through, and I'm already like, man, this thing needs to be about half the length.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. It's like boom.
Shorter.
But we wouldn't have known that because you and I sat in a hotel room in a vacuum in Houston mapping it out. And we're like, all right, this is our safe to fail experiment. We feel like this has merit. Cool. Take it and ship it to some people, get feedback. And my guess is at the end of 6 months, they'll probably be like, yeah, this thing, can we just do twice a week or something, or just cut it down to 3 months or something, right?
Yeah.
That's my gut on what the feedback will be.
Yeah.
Because I'm already feeling it myself, and you probably are as well.
Yeah. So you get feedback and you start.
Yeah.
And everybody, I mean, Alex Hormozi, all these guys that you're following online that they're doing stuff, they're all executing safe to fail experiments, and they're always coming up with, Hormozi did that launch a few months, maybe a year ago. Everybody was excited about it. It was transformational. Everybody bought the cap, the book, everything. It was a success for him. But that's it. It dissipated, and now he's promoting. He's wearing the school cap, and he's promoting school, and maybe that worked. I don't know if that thing's working for him. I haven't seen it take off like everything else has taken off. It might be a failure for him. And so soon he'll be doing something else. And this is the wisdom of safe to fail, is that we're always putting something else out there to stay in the game.
And, you know what? This also goes back to my skateboarding days, dude. Like, and probably you with surfing. It's like, man, let's just say sports overall. Like, but when it came to skateboarding, particularly when I was coming up in the 80s and the early 90s, we were still inventing tricks. Tricks were, we didn't have the internet to disseminate this information down, right? And so all we did all day was safe to fail experiments. And every once in a while you'd land it and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I landed that. Let's see if that's a repeatable process. And then boom, boom, boom. You're like, when my kids land a new trick, my son, when he lands something new on a scooter, I'm like, do it 5 times. Get it imprinted 5 times. Go. Repeat. Get the muscle memory going. Remember that you can do it.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
It
applies to all kinds of all aspects of life, I would assume.
Well, it goes this. The guy who designed this model that I'm speaking about. It's called the Cynefin framework. He says that leadership is about, and listen to this. Bear with me here. Managing the potential of the present moment. So leadership is about managing the potential of the present moment. So what does that mean? It means that with who you are, with what you have, and with where you're at, something is possible. And it's up to the leader to envision, to discern. It's for Jose's job to say, what's possible for Jose with my experience, with my resources, with my capacity, with my network, with my everything. I have to have a discerning vision of potential. And then once I have that vision, some idea of what's possible, okay, how do I make it happen now? Safe to fail. That's what it is. Start designing safe to fail experiments and learning and honing and repeating and going until you create the condition. Because in the end, you don't make it happen. You create the conditions, and it possibly happens. There's no guarantees in complexity. There's no guarantees that what you want to happen is going to happen. You're just
right.
And then you get into politics, like you guys are in elections right now. This is fascinating because the fourth type of challenge is chaos, and chaos is when shit hits the fan. You don't experiment in chaos. In chaos, you stop the bleeding, you put out the fire, and you try to stabilize the system. You want the churn you want to stop the churn. You want to stabilize the system again and get it back to complexity. You want the challenge to be complex. You don't want the challenge to be chaotic.
Right.
You see somebody like one of your presidential candidates, like Donald Trump, he thrives in chaos.
Dude, that dude's
he thrives in he's confusing everything. He's just creating chaos and it's interesting. It's fascinating to observe. But
it is. I mean, it's psychologically that's part of how he won the first time. It's like, he's just so he's very persuasive and also confusing,
unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
So the wisdom of safe to fail, and it's transforming when you start, because to me it's a mindset. When my clients actually get it, when they adopt it, and when they install this new program into their mind, they start acting. Yeah, it's like
you've seen it with me.
Of course,
I mean, you've seen it with me. Yeah, it's like all right.
So.
And not having emotional attachment when something doesn't go correctly. I mean, sure, you can get.
It's always going to be.
You can be emotionally attached to things. Yeah, I was going to say you can have emotional attachment, but just not letting it be like take you down. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, okay, this. I'm going to stop doing this project. Let's just use my last podcast, Franchise My Business podcast. Did great. Talked to a lot of great people. Really hit that tipping point at a year, over 100 episodes, where I didn't have to go hunt for guests. They just started coming to me. They're still coming to me to this day. And yet it was like, all right, I'm not wed to it. It served its purpose. It was fun. I wouldn't even call it a failure because I could reboot it back up tomorrow and it would be a resounding success again. It just didn't fit my needs going forward. Yeah. Okay. I needed to make room for this podcast.
Well, even
I was like, I got room in my life for one podcast. Which one can I make a bigger impact with? It wasn't this businessy thing. It was like, wow, man, if Jose and I get in here, we rap about the stuff we care about. Maybe that's actually where I should invest my time.
Well, when you got this mindset, when you have what I call a complexity capable mindset, what you ask yourself and what you value is the learning. It's the information that you're gathering. It's the wisdom that you're getting. It's wisdom. It's information.
Yeah.
So whether this podcast takes off or not, I'm wiser for it. I'm smarter for it. And I understand things better for it. Myself, our conversations. So there's value in this experiment. And, I was talking to two partners. And one of them hired me to navigate the complexities of the relationship. And we talked about safe to fail. And I said, your partnership, just like ours, just like you and I, is a safe to fail experiment. In other words, it might work or it might not. And this person said, that gives me anxiety. That gives me, I'm almost feeling like a panic attack. You're telling me that it might not work. And I'm like, but in reality, it's the truth. If it will, it will. And if it won't, it won't.
It won't. Yep.
And months after working with this person, they become unattached. And they're like, now I'm like so unattached to it working that we can work better.
Right.
Because I'm so unattached, I can create better. I can focus better. I can think better. I can be more creative. I mean, we are performing better by not being so attached to it working and not failing. It just changes the game.
Yeah, it really does. And I've seen this, man, gosh, I'm sitting here thinking about business that I encountered like 7-8 years ago, not too long after we launched this company. It was a company here in Kansas City, okay, that specialized. It was a brick and mortar and a high rent in Leawood, Kansas. Okay, so Leawood, Kansas is it's the most expensive place to live in Kansas City. Okay, so Leawood, Kansas, high rent retail, and they were selling stuff for people who love the beach. Do you know how far away from a beach we are here, man?
Yes.
Like fundamentally, we are landlocked. I always tell people I'm geographically screwed in relation to getting to a beach and still being in the continental United States. You literally probably could not get further away from an ocean than Kansas City because we're right in the middle of the United States. And so I'm sitting here and they're asking for my help. And I'm like, man, I would love to help you, but I think the answer is you're in the wrong business. People don't care enough. There's a subset of people who care. Don't get me wrong. I'm a bona fide beach bum myself, but I am not going to go there and buy your beach stuff. I'm sorry. I might buy it when I go to the beach, but I'm not thinking about it in December in Kansas City. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And they were just so into this business, and you know, they crash and burn. Did not work, right? But that was, and I've also seen that in a business here in downtown Lee Summit. They're doing a GoFundMe to try to support the business, and I'm like, you just need to realize that it's over. Like, it's safe to fail, and I know it sucks, and it probably is catastrophic for your family's finances and all those things. But maybe if you'd approached it a different way and you weren't so wed to it, you know,
product to the service.
And it's like for me and the factory, our brand, you know, I was emotionally attached to this company for a very, very long time. Very, very long time. It's only been the past couple of years where I'm like, that's not me. I own that company. I'm the 100% owner of that company today. But that's not me. I'm not the company anymore, right? The company could go away, get sold, close, change brands, whatever. And I would be okay with that now. Sure, there'd be a part of me that would be a little bit sad, but for the most part, it's like, all right. But there was one point where I'm like, no, if that happens, that's my identity. I'm done. How catastrophic would that be?
Yeah.
And now I look back and I'm like, man, that's actually some really shallow shit.
Yeah. I've had this talk around people hiring somebody. Like, should I hire this person? I'm like, I don't know. Give it a try.
Yeah.
So
what's the worst that can happen?
So the way, the difference between negotiating a safe to fail experiment and getting it right, I don't know, fixed mindset approach is, look, we want to bring you in. We're going to observe for the first 3 months, see how it's going. And then we're going to reassess, see if we can continue, see how we reassess as we go along. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, great. And so instead of saying we're going to hire you, and then 3 months later, like, oh my God, this isn't working. How do I fire this person? Oh my God, I don't want to fire them. So you keep them on for 6 months more. That's already a failure. It already failed 6 months ago. And you still have them because you're fixed on, I can't fire them. I can't, it's not. No, you should have approached it since the beginning as, we'll see how it goes. Let's just be open and see how, let's date. Let's date a little while. And then.
That's what I did in this business, dude. I started doing that, and it was been transformational because there's times when I didn't have that policy, right? And now I'm like, hey, we're going to work together for 90 days. As a matter of fact, you can't be an employee here for 90 days. Like, you want to be a contractor and figure out if you like this here, and if we like you, I am open for that. And then if that works out, we can explore full-time employment. And if that's not okay with you, that's okay with me. Like, we don't have to try this together, but we need to see if we work well together, right?
Yeah, if it works.
Yeah.
So another part where this is powerful is, I had a client who's creative. She's an artist, but she was said that she wasn't a salesperson. She was creating art, but she wasn't selling it. She wasn't promoting it. She wasn't doing anything with it. She's actually the one that wrote to me today. Today is our 4th year anniversary from starting to work together.
Oh, that's what that was? That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So
I was wondering who that was. That's cool.
So I started working with her, and she was creating these collages, this art, and I was like, yeah, but let's use this wisdom of safe to fail and make a few, and just, what do you call it when an artist makes like a few items?
Reproduction?
No. When they make
A collection.
Make a collection,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
promote it and see what happens. And it's safe to fail. So what does that mean? It means that if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like, you know what I mean? We know it's just an
Yeah.
experiment. You're just trying it out. Shit, she made the collection, she put it out, and she sold all of them shortly. And she's like, that's it. My life is different now. And she has gone on to just live, and she has become a force in creativity that people now admire. In the last 4 years, there's the people around her admire her, recognize her. She's owning it, and it's just completely transformed her life. And she can pinpoint it to just being safe to fail. This is just another experiment. This is just another try, another practice. Let's see if it works. And then you just go and see where it takes you. And, to me, that mindset has just changed my life completely.
I agree, dude. I agree. I mean, particularly what I found with this process, because I was already a lean startup type of guy as a digital marketer. I've almost always tried to tell my clients and educate them like, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to do this, and we're going to get feedback, and we're going to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And it's going to be iterations, and we may move things pretty quickly because we know, hey, we try this and it doesn't work for you. We know what the next 7 things are to do in order, right? But when I looked at how I felt with my initiatives and taking that own advice, I didn't used to think that way. It was very much into permanence almost, particularly if I go back to my career as an employee, basically spending 25 years climbing that corporate ladder from, my first job in marketing, I was a traffic manager. It means I was like a logistics type of person. I wasn't even really in marketing, I was working for a marketing company up to chief marketing officer. And I'm like, boom, 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 going up here. At every rung in the ladder, it almost, even most of those jobs looked like big decisions. Like, oh man, should I do this or whatever? I never really looked at it as, hey, this will be a temporary thing, and then there'll be an end to it, and then there'll be something afterwards. And I have to think that if I had those tools in my mental toolbox back then, how much more, I think, rewarding my job career would have been.
Yeah, the journey. The journey would just be more fun, joyous, curiosity, experimentation.
Absolutely.
Full of curiosity.
Absolutely.
So, what happens then, and I agree that, I gave this talk at one of our masterminds. And this really crashed with one of the guys that was big on SOPs.
Oh yeah.
It kind of, because I am not an SOP kind of guy.
No, you're not.
No, it's an SOP in my life. That's it. We're kind of done. But I understand SOPs are important, of course, and they can be a risk when you oversimplify complexity. And this is theory. So when you oversimplify complexity, in other words, you develop an expert mindset where you start saying things like, oh, we got this. We got it dialed in. We know what we're doing. We've done it. And this works. When you oversimplify complexity and you standardize it and you put it into the simple category, that could work for some time, but you could just actually set yourself up to, that's the easiest way to fall into chaos, into catastrophic failure. By oversimplifying complexity and bringing it into simplicity, you just now are in the biggest risk of falling into catastrophic failure. So you always want to have this mindset of complexity or complicated. Do we need an expert, or do we need safe to fail? Because in safe to fail, you actually bring in multiple experts, but they don't know the answer. They actually come up with greater experiments. You bring in multiple experts to come up with more creative experiments and gather more information and so on and so forth. But oversimplification. I would invite people to watch the BlackBerry documentary. It's really cool. But
is it? I haven't watched it yet.
Well, watch it on Prime. It's called BlackBerry, I think, and they were at the top. BlackBerry was dominating the market. Now, like 70% of the intelligent phone market, and then iPhone came up with the touchscreen, and
boom,
the guy from BlackBerry was so attached to the product, was so attached to. There's no way people are going to want a touchscreen. And you know what his argument was, at least in the movie? We have a keyboard and the noise it makes. People are hooked.
The tactile feedback.
They are hooked on the keyboard and the noise it makes. The touchscreen doesn't have a keyboard and doesn't make any noise. Nobody's going to want it. And they kept on telling him. You start getting messages that the experiment is not working anymore. What was working is not working anymore. We have to do something. And if you don't, catastrophic failure.
Right.
Yep. Interesting, right?
History. Yeah, I was going to say history probably is just littered with these types of both in the business as well as personal world where, people didn't pull the plug quick enough.
No. You got to fail quick.
Yeah.
Fail quick.
You know what? Well, I haven't always been somebody who's recognized the safe to fail concept. I think I've always been one of those people that when I realize something's fail, I'm able to like course correct pretty quickly. And there's probably something there, like the elasticity of being able to fail or realize that something's, hey, we should maybe change directions. It can be something as simple as your diet. It can be a variety of different things, right? And then take a pause and be like, yeah, this actually is not working out. I need to change it. And now that I think back to some points in my career, I didn't have the courage, I guess. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's courage helps with the elasticity of failure.
Courage?
Yeah, because it's like, hey, if you're a courageous individual, okay, and we introduce this you've got two human beings. You got somebody who's courageous and somebody who's very timid, okay? So you say, hey, here's a set of circumstances, put them into a safe to fail experiment, and then that experiment fails, okay? The person over here who is a little bit more resilient is going to be like, okay, that didn't work out how I planned, suboptimal, whatever. Let's try to look forward and not look back too much. Okay.
Yeah.
This other person who's a little bit more timid or less resilient, which is something that you train to be. I think the more times you get kicked and you fail, the more resilient you become, But then that type of person, when that failure happens, could be the last major failure that they experience. I mean, it could be something that frankly takes them to a point where they take their lives, or it could be something where they permanently, and I've seen this happen, like permanently are just down in the gutter here forever.
So yeah,
I think about a company I used to work with, a subsidiary of AMC Theaters that no longer exists. That company hasn't existed in over 20 years. There are still a handful of individuals, it's been about 15 years, still a handful of individuals that I know, some of my friends that are still emotionally attached to that failure. And I'm like, dude, if I were still carrying that around for another freaking decade and a half, that would be super unhealthy for me. Very unhealthy. Very, very unhealthy.
Well, here's something that I actually pride myself in and actually try to stay humble in also, is that I have been able to foresee that something's going to stop working before it stops working. Like I can anticipate, or have been able, at least I feel for myself that I've been able to anticipate, like when I started focusing on building a market in the US, I was like, you have to start doing this. Or when one-on-one coaching, I can at some point, if something doesn't change, it's gonna start to dwindle. You better have something. So I'm always I feel I have this ability, even Unbreakable, my program, it took off and it was going and going and going and going. but I can sense for myself, like, okay, it's not going to keep on going the way it's going. You got to make adjustments. So I'm always anticipating for myself what's coming. And I've actually been able to, even in my last company I was in, like I was telling my wife way ahead of time before anybody else saw, like I already sensed like something's not working. We have to start making changes.
Yeah. Just change.
Yeah. We need to start preparing. And she didn't see it. She actually was like, ignore it. She wanted me to ignore it and keep on going. Like, no, ignore it and just keep on pushing. I'm like, I can't ignore this. Yeah. I don't think she was even like, go for another month, go for another 5 months. And I'm like, I can't foresee this going for another 5 months. Like, be ready for this because and I had a client one time actually be scared of, after working with him for so long, he actually foresaw that something was going to stop working. And he was scared that he actually influenced it. Like, I'm really nervous about this because I thought that this was going to happen. I'm like, dude, that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm the same way, dude. Like I've always seen things, the one where that company went away, that blindsided all of us. I mean, we just had all hands on meeting and it was like, hey, we're merging with another company. You guys don't have a job. Like, okay, that blindsided everybody. But if I think back to my other pursuits and things like that, like I've always gotten off the bus at the right time. For me, doesn't mean like if I think about my last bus that I got off of, 8-year run, great organization, they're killing it today. It's awesome, right? But it was right for me to get off that bus at that point in time. I had contributed everything that I felt like I could contribute, and vice versa. I felt like they'd given me everything that I could get. The value exchange was, we had fulfilled each other's value exchanges, and it was time for both of us to move on, right? And I don't know about you, but I've kind of sensed that before in life, and then you see something kind of deteriorate or maybe crash and burn afterwards, and you're like, my gut was trying to tell me something. My senses were heightened. I was in an environment, and now it's like, all right, well, it's time for me to change my circumstances. No matter what happens here, I'm going to just extract myself and go do a different safe to fail experiment.
Right? Dude, bottom line, I've learned to trust myself. I've learned to trust myself to a point where, and again, without oversimplifying. So always have some doubt. I love. There's a Zen book. It's called The Great Doubt. And it's all about, if you think you've made it to Zen, if you think you're Zen now, you're no longer Zen. So you always have to live with this doubt. Like that, if you think you've made it, doubt if you got it, then, so whenever I say something like, whenever I say, oh, I've learned to trust myself, and I trust myself absolutely, right after I'll be like, yes, but still doubt it. But still, you got to doubt it because that means you're oversimplifying it and think you got it. And once you think you got it, you're fucked. You'll learn you haven't got it. So
wisdom of safe fails. Wisdom of safe fails. We always try to leave with a actionable things or last parting thoughts. Mine I'd like to share is pretty simple. As much as possible, try to separate yourself from the permanence of situations that could be safe to fail experiments, such as, things like jobs. Let's use that as an example, or a client, or a new initiative that you're doing, right? Realize the following. In 100 years, everything you're working on and everybody that you know, maybe not everybody, will be dead and it will not matter. Okay. So that's an ultimate way to help reframe how self-important we think our projects are. Boom, 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 boom. It's like, nah, actually, in the whole scheme of things, we're really freaking small. So go through this world, conduct safe to fail experiments, and remove yourself from the permanence of the outcome of those safe to fail experiments. Without further ado, we're going to wrap up. We want to thank you, the listener, for listening. We deeply appreciate it. The way that we know you're listening is through our subscriptions and through our reviews. So if you feel inclined to do so, please leave them. Until next time, I'm Kevin. He's Jose. We're Hole in the Soul Podcast. Peace. Have a phenomenal week and be well.